Hello, everyone. I guess we could say that, something in the air has changed of late. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces, and I also want to extend a big welcome to many of the new ones joining us this year. So my name is Jessica Shadian. I'm the president and CEO of Arctic360. We are Canada's national Arctic think tank, and we convene leaders from Canada's North, Indigenous and territorial, alike, Bay Street, industry, and defense, along with our allied counterparts to discuss the big Arctic issues of the day. We also publish papers. We have our Breaking the Ice podcast series, among many other things. And our mission really was born from a recognition that Canada needed its own Arctic think tank to elevate the national conversation about Canada's North and the Arctic region, and to provide a platform for Canada to engage on the world stage. Yet it was also born from the recognition that we really must find solutions to drive private sector capital north to build the social, economic, and defense infrastructure that our North requires. So, 8 years on, geopolitical realities have changed drastically. The Arctic is not only central to uncertain geopolitics, but it's also now Canada's, I would say, single most important region of strategic significance. The changes have lent new purpose to the work that we do, not least in providing a stage for Canada to engage with our allies here at home. But domestically, I would say it's also given us focus on building the public-private Indigenous partnership solutions, basically a sudden urgency that I would say up to now was anything but that. However, as Indigenous Northerners repeatedly state, they want to thrive and not just survive. I think it should be our motto for the North as a whole. So today marks our 7th conference and our 8th year. And in thinking about how to best situate my opening remarks, I defer to what any good academic would do. I decided, let's start from the beginning. Well, when we set out planning our first Arctic360 conference in 2018, our intention was simple. Let's get Canada talking about the North, about how to attract the private capital needed so we can build the infrastructure the North requires. And recognizing that capital investment opportunities are also in part determined by geography, market access, and economies of scale, and the fact that we are bookended by the US state of Alaska and Greenland, our conversation soon included our friends and colleagues across our Arctic borders. So off we went to make our rounds on Bay Street. We were praised by institutional investors for our noble efforts. We were asked, why internet? So Northerners can spend more time on Facebook? We were told by pension funds how important infrastructure is for the North, and that their expertise includes infrastructure portfolios with investments in ports, roads, energy, and telecommunications projects around the world. Our North, however, they said, it's not something they're really looking at investing in, much less do they really even have a team that would be able to do so. But in the end, the North showed up to our conference, as did Canada, so did our Alaskan and Greenlandic colleagues, and so did a few from Bay Street that, despite the challenges of actually investing, they really believed it was worthwhile to join the discussion. So we spent 2 days talking about the potential in the North and how decades of underdevelopment had left basically Northerners lacking the most basic critical infrastructure, from transportation to energy, telecommunications, healthcare, and adequate housing. The conference ended with a feeling of, optimism and a will to continue that conversation. And it really didn't matter so much that really it was a conversation amongst Northerners themselves and those already engaged in the region. It was really the focus of the discussion that mattered. And since that time, attention to the Arctic has grown. Arctic Council meetings had outgrown the capacity of high school gymnasiums. They included Secret Service details, delegations from China to France, and strict protocols on who was invited and the door you can use to get in. Canada's Arctic, when it found national attention, it began to expand beyond the bounds of climate change to include the threat posed by potential Chinese Arctic investments. What was missing, however, was how to attract the institutional investors, even our own pension funds, that we do want investing in our North. Well, then came 2020, and the new year kicked off with a gift of a global pandemic. And with no sense of irony, Canadian families suddenly found themselves, for the first time, waking up every morning with the overwhelming sense of insecurity about access to the most infrastructure that they took for granted every day. So all at once, the nation mobilized. Canadians were provided for, and everything was done to try to make everyone feel safe, secure, and remain healthy. After all, access to critical infrastructure and a functioning economy is, of course, paramount. Then, just as we thought the global chaos that was COVID was behind us, we woke up one February morning in 2022 to learn of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And this was 10 days before our annual Arctic conference, where the Arctic state ambassadors to Canada and Greenland were set to celebrate 25 years of Arctic cooperation with Russia, talking about its then chairmanship of the Arctic Council. Well, the invasion immediately pulled the world back into a state of chaos. For Ukrainians, it was nothing short of a horror, and it also severed once and for all the Arctic peace at the top of the world. So instead of celebrating Arctic cooperation, the remaining 7 Arctic nations plus Greenland delivered a different message. It was unified, non-wavering. They doubled down on their commitment to international norms and the laws of democratic rules-based system, as well as their commitment to Arctic cooperation. Well, that was February 2022. Fast forward to February 2025, we again convened for our annual conference only days after the second inauguration of Donald Trump and his infamous press conference that followed. Trump declared the US was going to annex Greenland and Canada would become the 51st state. Since that surreal moment, the US has upended global trade. Trump had a powwow with Putin in Anchorage. The Department of War ousted a sitting president that himself declared his presidency, despite election results stating otherwise. The US also published a national security strategy that put in print the words that Donald Trump had repeatedly said out loud and in all capital letters on social media. Canada also elected a new prime minister. And before the ink was dry on the paper with his signature, Prime Minister Carney was off to set in motion a new national agenda with the speed and seriousness to match the times. Canadians from all corners soon began experiencing in real time the country's new focus and priorities at home, and a whole new approach to diplomacy with our allies abroad. Suddenly, instead of being patted on the back by Canadian investors and basically shown the door, financial institutions began looking to see, well, how they can get in on the action and the sudden attention that's been brought to the North by our government. It has become literally such a frenzy that I have personally been approached with sales pitches for various types of satellites to buy that were said to be, the best on the market for the North. I have their cards if you're looking. And then came the lead up to this year's February conference, when 2 calendar weeks, yet 2 geopolitical months ago, the US actually declared its immediate intentions to take Greenland and with force necessary. Our Prime Minister then stood on the world stage and said out loud that the post-World War II international rules-based order no longer rules today's political landscape. It is time for the middle powers to form alliances and chart together a new path forward. Well, in my opening remarks last year, I said, gosh, the times that we were in, they felt like we, the collective West, were the band playing the music on the Titanic as it was toppling and sinking into the iceberg-laden sea. Perhaps, in some respects, that Titanic has sunk. What matters now is what comes next and the means to get there. And this brings us to the next 2 days. Well, on the domestic front, where it was often said that, gosh, Canada just really needs to figure out how to walk and chew gum at the same time and maybe pick up the pace a little bit. Well, today we have a government that is chewing gum, eating dinner, running a marathon, and doing diplomacy and lifting weights all at the same time. We have our entire North doing the same, not only to keep speed with which the government is moving, but to be on side with Canada's efforts so that Canada can move forward together in building our collective future here at home. And let's not forget that all of this is set within a very quickly changing Arctic and geopolitical landscape. So all of this is to say, we're kind of in this together. No one has all the answers, and we really don't have the luxury to fake it until we make it. So for the next 2 days, let's just all do our best to stop running around like headless chickens, as we all are, and just try to listen and discuss with one another so we can actually maybe take stock for a moment as to where we are, what we need, and how to get there. So maybe we could set sail towards better waters. Thank you. Oh, thank you. And I also, none of this would be possible whatsoever without the commitment and the support of our sponsors. They mean everything for us, and I think it's worthy of recognizing them now. So we have Global Affairs Canada, the Galley office. I'd like to thank Davey, Agnico Eagle, Can-Nor, Dominion Dynamics, NTI, the Arctic Economic Development Corporation, CIB, Hatch, Concert Infrastructure, International Telecom, and Nunistar. So really, honestly, we do thank you.